What if your wins at work didn't have to stop there? Workhuman's employee recognition platform is built on the world's largest rewards marketplace, tying recognition for great work to the things that people love outside it. Crush a project? Snag that baking dish you've been eyeing. Hit a milestone? Celebrate with a weekend getaway. With over 1 million gadgets, gift cards, and experiences, something is redeemed for in Workhuman's in-house store every 3 seconds. Each reward deepens connections, boosts engagement, and helps fuel a culture that knows their work matters and has the receipts to prove it. Head over to workhuman.com to learn more. Workhuman, a proud supporter of the HR Happy Hour Network. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the System of Record show on the HR Happy Hour Network. I'm Steve Bose. Trish Steed is with me today on System of Record.
I'm
Good
in
to
the
see you.
house. I was
Been a
excited.
while.
I'm like, okay, why am I on a system of records? So,
Well, you're
when
on the System of Record because we were able to get, I want to thank him in advance. Chris Leone, great friend of the show. He's done the HR Happy Hour show a number of times, but from Oracle, joining us on System of Record on a real busy week for him. Lots of announcements going on, AI world events happening all over the place. But Chris, welcome first of all, and then I want to start hitting you up with some really important System of Record, System of Outcome questions. How are you?
Sure. First, great to be here, Steve, and Trish. Always a pleasure. And yeah, of course, anytime you ask me to come, I'm gonna make it. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate it because it is a busy time for sure. And look, everybody's busy, right? But just on the back of a really big announcement from Oracle last week, Oracle Fusion applications, Agentic applications, major announcement. Before we talk about the details of the announcement, Chris, you've been writing some really, I'd call them viral LinkedIn posts over the last few months. And the most recent ones are really talking about a real shift in the enterprise technology landscape from, oddly enough, System of Record, which we call this podcast, but to really thinking about those systems differently into systems of outcomes and systems of execution. So before we get into some of the details and talk about the announcement, maybe let's start there. What is happening in enterprise tech that's influencing this shift in these big systems?
Yeah, it's been a long time. It's been a long time coming, and I personally and my team have really been very, very deep in the foundational models and the new technology, and we've been delivering on a pretty solid execution path over the last couple years, and it's been a really good transition. And we'll get into more details about what we've delivered, but at a high level, the way I kind of describe it is, enterprise systems, enterprise software has been doing the same thing for the last 30 years, right? I mean, these systems have been, a huge part of our lives. I've built them for many, many years. But they've been very passive in nature. And that's kind of how I describe it. Look, they've been systems of record. They've been, they've stored our transactions. They've kept them safe. But anytime we needed to move work forward or there was a cognitive load involved, we had to understand the context of a process or, had to get expertise from somewhere outside the system. It was always the human, the person that kind of was the glue for these systems of record and all of the knowledge work that happened outside the system. And that's been the way we built system for the last 30 years. And it was not because we didn't want to do better or we didn't want to make the systems more interactive and more knowledgeable. It was we just didn't have the tools to do that. And so that's what I've been kind of writing about. And AI has really changed that perspective and allowed us to do things a lot differently. And AI and agents, as what I'll call kind of the currency that we can use now, allows us to really design and build systems that really have context, really have expertise built in, really have domain knowledge and can really help us move work forward in a material way, and it really changes the types of systems we can build now. And so that's kind of what I've been writing
Mhm.
about, and the technology really lends itself to really building a different type of system. And that's why I say, these systems have to mature and they have to move from systems of record
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
systems of engagement, systems of outcomes, which really allow us to execute work.
I'm so glad you said that because I think that what we're seeing in the market is a lot of just ideation, just little incremental changes, and a lot of these companies could potentially make these big changes. What do you think? Maybe before we get into the details, what do you think makes Oracle different? You've spent your biggest chunk of your career there, like you said, you've
Yep.
been building systems for a long time. To me, it's a fundamentally different way of thinking
Yeah.
when you're approaching something like a system of outcomes
Yep.
versus the system of record, what do you think is your sort of special sauce there at Oracle that gives you that push to innovate?
You know, I think we were lucky, or at least the applications team was lucky that we had a lot of technology available to us very, very early. So
Mm,
we were a cloud infrastructure company as well, and very early on we were given the gift of these large language models, and they were served up to us in a way that allowed us to embed this technology, embed this intelligence throughout our application suite. Now, we spent a lot of time building our application suite. We really do have an integrated front office, back office, and middle office set
mhm,
of applications, and we built them on one data model, and that certainly helped and has worked to our advantage. But having a cloud infrastructure component, having large language models available to us early, being able to build with the technology. So we started very, very early, taking some early models,
mhm,
and building what I'll call generative AI services. And we started doing this 2 years ago. And you guys were
Mhm.
at an
Yep.
offsite
Yeah.
that we had, and we were briefing the analysts. And I said, hey, look, we're going to start building this technology in, and we're going to start with these kind of completion prompts, and we're going to build job descriptions, and we're going to create goals, and we're going to do all these things with context from the application and these large language models, and bringing those two things together and delivering that capability. And then we progressed into agents, and we said, hey, look, we can go beyond just these kind of single completion prompts in the flow of work. We can create these kind of advisor agents and use new technologies like RAG, and the ability to have a knowledge store and take documents and put them in our vector store, and ask questions against them, again in context with the application.
mhm,
And that allowed us to get to the next set of kind of process improvement. But again, Trish, like you said, it was incremental, right? So the first set maybe
mhm,
saved, I used to give, analogies of like pennies, dimes, and, quarters.
Mhm.
And then, these advisor agents moved to maybe, half dollars and dollars, but it was just kind of incremental
Mhm.
improvements. But the big thing that, I think our true advantage was, it wasn't just my team that was building kind of the central technology and the AI foundation. It was the large number of application developers that were able to take
mhm,
advantage of the technology, understand what it meant in a supply chain process, in a HR process, or in a financials process, and apply that technology to real business problems that they were trying to solve. So I think it was a combination of all those things: having technology available, being able to deliver a centralized platform, and allowing a large developer team kind of democratize the ability for them to build it into our solutions and not think of it as an add-on. So,
Mhm.
so what they were able to
right,
do is use it as just another tool that they could add value in the systems that they were delivering. They didn't have to worry about, oh, is this going to be a high cost for our customers? We're going to
yeah,
include it,
Yeah.
and they could just say, hey, this is
yes.
how we're going to put this technology in and let our customers get value from it.
Mhm.
Yeah, love that, and I would add just to, having been a customer years ago and then the last 10, 12 years being there and watching all this, because you all have been talking about AI forever, right?
Yeah.
Forever. And it's you hold yourselves accountable, I think, in a way that I don't see other vendors out there in the space, not just in the HR space, but just in the tech space, right? When you stand up in front of a group and you say, this is what we're going to do,
Yep.
you do it. And
Yeah.
the next time we see you, you've done it. So I would say also, I think you're very good with your teams about just holding yourselves accountable and pushing those boundaries and those limits that, organizations might have some fear
Yeah.
right? To do some of these things, and you're just like, "Nope, we've got it. We're gonna include it. You're on it."
Yeah. There's a
Right?
whole adoption side. We can talk about the
Yeah,
adoption side.
that's a whole 'nother story.
Mhm.
But what I can, and we are having good adoption, but we can talk about like some of the
Yep.
struggles that customers are having and all those
Sure.
things and the governance models. But the one thing that I would say is like we've been doing AI for a while, and a lot of vendors are saying, yeah, we've been doing AI. We've had machine learning models. We built our own foundation models. I truly think that the pivot that generative AI and these large language models allowed
Yeah.
us to do was in the past, when we built these foundation models on our own, it was a long time. We had to get the data set right. We had to build these
Mhm.
models. We had to test them. We had to work with customers. And by the time the beginning of that process started and you got something, truly valuable for customers, it could be a year or it could
Yeah.
be 18 months. And it was a very long drawn out process. And we built a lot of those models like all of our, the vendors that we compete with or whatever. But what generative AI did was allowed us to iterate much faster,
Mhm.
democratize. We pushed out. We built some central resources, but we pushed out the ability to build these things much faster,
Mhm.
and in a much more lightweight way. And we were rolling out completion prompts and even advisor agents in weeks, and
Mhm.
testing them. And we had big
Wow.
evaluation tests and all those things. But being able to roll out these things very very quickly, and then get customer feedback and then make them better and it really changed the game for us and really changed the game for our customers, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chris, I mentioned you've been writing about some of these topics quite interestingly on LinkedIn lately, and there's something you wrote about. It was something I was thinking about too, and I did like a 15 or 17-minute workplace minute, which is supposed to be like a 3-minute show. I did like 17 minutes on this kind of issue about a week or so ago, and it was the idea this. And you could tell me what you think about this, and I think I know where you're coming from. So you wrote about this somewhat. Is some people are saying in enterprise tech, they're seeing a world where these systems of record, whether it's HR, whether it's finance, supply chain, sales, right, all of them, manufacturing, they're there. They haven't, as you said, they haven't changed much, right, in 30 years. So they're better. They look better. They're easier to use. But fundamentally, they do lots of the same things, right, that they did 30 years ago. That they're at risk potentially, right? The value of those systems to customers and therefore what the systems themselves are worth, quote unquote, could be really disrupted by some kind of an agentic orchestration layer or even a whole nother, whether it comes in from a Gemini or Anthropic or somebody else builds it to say, hey, just come here. We'll connect. We'll use, there's some there's some protocols now that exist, MCP, there's a couple of others that will help these tools just connect to finance, connect to HR, connect to supply chain. So a user might say, hey, give me a rolling inventory report and show me the best salespeople and whatever it was, right? Just tell the prompt what you want. And the agent or the agent orchestration engine will just figure out how to
Yeah.
go into Oracle and go into whatever manufacturing system you might be using, but something else, and so on and so forth, right? And spit out the answer. And the user doesn't really care anyway, right? They just want their answer, right?
Yeah.
So that's the setting, right? And I'm going to ask a question here, but is that a future or even a semi-future that we could be heading towards? And because you wrote about that a little bit,
Yeah.
about where the value is going to come in enterprise tech. And I'd love your thoughts on that. Like,
This I'm pretty passionate about this. And I like to have a little bit of fun on LinkedIn. It's an interesting platform. I do like to tease some of our competitors. I like to use Workday a little bit. You'll see some me kind of going after Salesforce a little bit, but it's all in fun. Look,
yeah,
I think I think that the system of record vendors um, have a huge advantage. I know how hard it is for us to build agents or agentic systems. And we'll talk about the difference between kind of what we've been doing from these kind of co-pilots or kind of assistant type technologies to
Mhm.
truly kind of executing work, which I think is truly where we have a big impact on the business.
mhm,
And that's where I think all of the system records vendors need to go if they're going to create a moat around their applications. The reality is the Databricks of the world and even the Salesforce that has front office, but has to, kind of facilitate back office by taking data out out and putting in a big cloud or, a data lake. All of these, and the ServiceNows of the world, that they do have some transactional aspects. They do have a ticketing system, and they do, they do have a service set of products that are very successful, but they don't own the system of record. And so what these systems can do is they can take data out. They can rationalize it. They can build an enterprise graph so they understand, what the different, how the data relates to one another, and they put a semantic layer on top of it. And you can ask a bunch of questions about it, and you can find out, hey, look, who is my next best customer to sell to? What opportunity should I be pursuing? But the problem is gets you like 10% of the way to actually doing work for people. And this is what I keep trying to explain to people. If you truly want to automate work, and I give these examples of what systems of outcomes really mean. If you truly want to automate work, you have to not just say, hey, here are the 9 things that I can do, and I'm going to go post a transaction back and figure out how to write back to an API. If you're truly going to automate work, you have to be part of the system of record, because you're going across an entire end-to-end process. And I give a sourcing. We have a sourcing command center as one of our agentic applications. So I think customers are getting value from these assistants that are in the flow of work that can come from an external system. They're better if they come and they're built in, because you get full context of what's happening and real-time ability to update transactions. But if you move to an agentic application, and where we're delivering now and where the future will become, is the ability to execute end-to-end work. And so we have an agentic application called the Sourcing Command Center. And what this agentic application can do is you can go give it an outcome that you want to achieve. And this is what I try to explain to everybody. You can go say, look, for the outcome for this process that I want to solve, I want to reduce our supplier spend by 15%. I want to reduce lead times by 10%. And you give that as an outcome. Then you put together a team of agents that are specialists. Each one, maybe I have a negotiations agent that knows how to negotiate sourcing events. And maybe I, have an agent that can create great RFQs. And that's what I built it around. It gets content. It understands what, how to describe that content. It creates these really great RFQs. And I can put this team of agents around this problem statement, and they can work and continuously move work forward and create RFQs, create sourcing events, award winners. Now, they don't have to do it completely autonomously. And what I say is, look, for now, most organizations are going to put human completely in the loop. These agentic applications can recommend and say, hey, these are the next set of actions that you should take. Here's the action that you can take. Hit this button and create the RFQ. Hit this button and create the sourcing event. Hit this button and create, award the winners. And there's 50 different transactions that happen. And it can crank through all of this, move work forward, do it 24/7. And the human is just saying, yep, approve, approve, approve. And then at some point, you don't need to approve every single one of those. Maybe you feel comfortable with the first 25 set of actions that are kind of lower value, they're within guardrails, and you just let those happen autonomously, and you're just making the oversight, the higher judgment calls. And so what we can do in the system of record is do all of that work, commit all of those transactions, and do it in a secure way. We still have all of the, functional and data level security. We still understand all the approvals. We have all the auditability. So everything that happens is fully auditable in our transactional system. Impossible to do unless you recreate the entire transactional system in a cloud and in a data lake and map all of that stuff. So when people tell me that the future of work is a data lake, it's nonsense. They don't understand what it really means to execute work. So now what we can do is we can go to customers and we can say, you can now have truly elastic labor. You can go, and if you have 30 collections people, right, and part of the year you need to scale that to 60 collections people, you don't have to add linear headcount and add 30 people. You can make some of that work autonomous, and you can scale that part of the business and then scale it back when you don't need it anymore. So this is where the future of work is going. It has to go in this direction. And you see it with a lot of the different tools that are in the consumer market. I know this is a longer answer. You probably want it, but if you look at the consumer world, there's the Nemo clause of the world and the open clause of the world, that are these personal assistants where you give them instructions and they go do work on your behalf. That exact same interaction model is going to happen in the enterprise. You're going to give it work. You're going to monitor the work. It's going to give you feedback. And when it runs into issues, you're going to say, go this way or go that way. And that's how it's going to progress over the next, not 5 years, over the next like 5 to 6 months. These are the types of
Yeah.
solutions. Now, the adoption curve will be very different. Customers need to feel comfortable with these things. And, it's like driving a full self-driving car. At the beginning, you take your hand off the wheel for going down the block, and then, then it's 2 blocks, and then you're driving to Napa, just sitting there talking to, your family. That's how this will progress. And so that's how we see the future of work unfolding.
Mhm.
Is that the reception you're getting? Because I mean, obviously, you just spent time in London, for example, with these announcements. When
Yep.
you're talking to these organizations that are going to be the ones or are using this, are they still at that stage of I love the analogy in the car, right? So, are they still, like, kinda, like, putting their hand on the wheel? Or are they like, "We trust our relationship with Oracle. You've gotten us this far. We're
Yeah.
ready to do a little bit more." Because I almost get the sense they might be ahead of some other large organizations that aren't working with Oracle.
Think that, I think this is new for a lot of organizations.
Mhm.
And the reality is that customers are still, um adopting, and we have a lot of adoption. We've had 7,000 customers adopt our agents and in the flow of work, and so we've had good adoption. I think it will be a long tail for customers to fully move to this kind of, I'm calling it the autonomous enterprise. I think it'll be a
Mhm.
long tail for customers to kind of move in that direction, but there'll be some early adopters, and the value and the return that they get will be so significant. They'll start to see the huge benefit, and they'll go through business transformations. The transformations of the future will not be, hey, I'm going to automate this, order to cash process, and this is how that we're going to step through the transactions. It's going to be, look, we can look at all the resources that we have within the organization. How much of this do we want to automate, right? I have
Mhm.
collections agents, I have HR, shared service people. How much of their job do I want to automate, and how much of their job do I want to do manually, and how much of it do I want to flex when I have the ability to flex? That's what the transformations will be going
Yeah.
forward. And so that's how system integrators will have to think about it. They're going to say, hey, look, what is all the work that we can automate in the enterprise? And how do we go about doing it? And we're thinking about building the next set of implementations. They're going to go look at that. Here's a list of labor that we can flex, and we know how to do it. And some of this can be autonomous, and you can turn it up over time, or you can turn it back over time. And so that's how these deployments will work. And I can speak personally. Our business technology coding has been disrupted. I mean, the codecs of the
Mhm.
world and the cloud codes of the world have really changed how we build our software, and
Yeah.
how we build smaller teams, and how we code things, and how we review things, and all of that has been disrupted. This same disruption is going to happen to all other industries. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to have less jobs. Every single technology major transformation we have has actually led to more jobs, and
Right.
so I think it'll just be different type of work that people
Yeah.
will be doing, but a lot of the work that can be automated is just going to be automated. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just going to be.
Mhm.
Chris, you mentioned system integrators a second ago, and there was at least one more question I did want to get out there as I was doing some of the research on this and doing some of the pre-reading. Um, I thought about that a little bit, right? Oracle certainly, and some of the other big providers work with all these big, great system integrators. You got great partners, right, who go out there, work with customers on transformations, on implementations. In this world, right, in this agentic world, is there room for those groups to still build tools that will, work with these apps in an agentic way? Can customers build them themselves? Like, how can is it open enough where they feel like, hey, I can get in there and create something that maybe Oracle didn't get around to delivering yet, or it's very custom to my organization, but I
Yeah,
want to take advantage of these capabilities. I'd love your just
sure.
perspective on
Eh,
that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's a couple different perspectives to look at. I mean, I think fundamentally implementations are going to have to change dramatically. I don't think we're going to have people keying in a bunch of setups
Yeah.
and
Can I just clap?
yeah. I think we're all waiting for those things to happen. So
Yeah.
that's gonna happen, and that's happening now. I mean, the
Yeah.
reality is,
Yeah.
there's so much that can be done from an automation perspective, and not having a kind of manual people do a bunch of this kind of lower level work that's going to go away. But will customers and will partners have have an ability to kind of personalize, configure, even, customize, so to speak, these systems. Of course. I mean, the key thing is, and the way we've approached, everybody will get to execution of work. And this is why I put these shout outs to system of vendor
Mhm.
counterparts, because the reality is every system of record has to go in this direction. AI will become the execution layer for all these systems. It has to be. There's no other choice. It has to be. It'll be part of our stack. It will become how work gets done and executed. Period. It's going to happen. Has to happen. If they want to stay relevant, or somebody else will disintermediate them, and you'll just be a bunch of APIs and a backend.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
but so that will happen. But what I think the system integrators will do is, we're going to put out agentic applications. We've shipped 22 of them, and they span a broader process. They handle a bigger cognitive load. So part of the value proposition of these agentic applications, we have one that's designed to source. So I can start with a CAD design. So I have, a product engineer. They look across bill of materials. They look across sourcing events and supplier data. And the system, these agents can understand context across a much broader process, right? Humans can't do that. It would be a team of humans, and I'm sharing information,
Right.
collaborating. So we're going to be able to solve broader problems. But what can happen now, system integrators can come in and, hey, look, in this industry, product design is done this way. I can bring in or create a different type of specialist, and I can define what that specialist does. I can build in the expertise based on how they should look at this design or this CAD design, and identify what inventory types I need. And so they can build in that specialty into the agent, one of the agent specialists, and make it their own.
Yeah.
Or they can bring in agents from other systems and make it part of that agentic system that we've created, and have it mix and share context with other agents. So they will have a significant amount of value to add, because what we're creating is a whole kind of knowledge infrastructure that sits under this agentic app. Now, this is how we've approached the problem.
Okay.
We define a problem set. It's a broad, set of context. The agents can reason across that and share share information. And it's kind of these agents all working together. Others might approach the problem differently, but at the end of the day, it's going to be this agents that are executing work around a defined problem set that you're trying to solve. That's kind of how it's going to come together. Systems of record vendors might solve it differently, but that's essentially what they're going to have to do.
Yeah. What kind of reaction are you getting? Because systems of outcome, I love there was one thing I read that you were talking about how it's not task oriented. And
Yes.
so many of us in this world right now, we are task oriented, right? We've sort of been led down that path, right? When everything went into the cloud. What is that next step like? Whether I'm in an enterprise size organization or maybe an organization that's a little bit smaller, like what should I be thinking of and what is my reaction to that's a pretty major big shift, right? On
Yeah.
what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll give you. We'll go back to the sourcing, the command center, which is
Okay.
managing kind of end to end sourcing events, and looks at demand, it looks at inventory, it looks at a broad level of things to create these sourcing events and all these things. And so what we can do if we give the agentic application an outcome, a goal, and we say, hey, look, your goal is to reduce supplier spend by 15% and reduce lead times by 10%. Each one of those agents that is working, when it's creating the RFQ, when it's like, when it's identifying which suppliers they need to respond to, or, the prices that they're going to ask them to come in with, who they're going to reward winners to, do they break the auction up into different winners based on, they always reason over the goal or objective of the agentic application. So each time they're recommending an action, a next step, this is what you need to follow up with the supplier. This is what you need to communicate them in order to get their bids in line. It's always going back to the outcome that agentic application is trying to achieve. So when I say it's an outcome, it would be like us creating a team and our boss is saying, hey, look, you need to go reduce our spend by this amount. How are you going to go do it? And when you go communicate to the suppliers, it's like, hey, we need to reduce our spend by 10%. Here's the auction. You need to come in this level.
Right.
I mean, it's the same thing. That's the
Right.
outcome that you want to achieve. Instead of humans doing it, we're having these agents collaborate and share information, but always going back to reasoning over that defined outcome. And those outcomes are different from every process. And so you can go and define those things. And when it recommends the next action to take, the next follow-up, the next communication, application to do, it's always thinking back to what that outcome is. And so that's how we've thought about assembling this set of agents around a pattern where they can share, they have memory, and they can collaborate and share context, all those things. It works from that perspective. Um, Others can approach it differently, but ultimately, when I say it's about outcomes, it's that defined outcome that you're trying to achieve.
Right.
Last question, I think, from me, Chris, on this is, what does that mean, would you say, and this could be a bit speculative since this is
Sure.
really early days on these technologies, but what do you think is the major outcome going to be to managers or leaders, right? Who maybe before I would have been a head of that team and I would have tasked 7 people on the team to go do all the 7 different elements, right, of this sourcing process that you
Yeah.
described. And now it's going to be run in many ways by agents. Like, what? I'm not talking about roles going away or not. I'm not talking about that at all. But just how do I think about it differently, and how do I sort of manage that? Whether it's an AI agent on my team kind of thing. Where does that leave how we're going to
Yeah.
run these businesses?
Yeah. I think that um, I think there's going to be a kind of marriage of human and machine. And I don't say that. I just say that it has to happen. I think humans will always be part of the decisioning process. They will have oversight. They will have judgment. They will make ethical trade-offs. They will monitor what's happening. Um, and as I said earlier, they may hit the like approve, take this action, take this action, take this action at the beginning. And then later on, they might only do it 50% of the time. And then later on, they might be just looking at what the team of agents did around a particular process. And if it runs into an issue, just managing those
Right.
issues and exceptions. And so I think that's how work will happen. And again, I think it will go process by process, role by role, and you'll be able to define what we can automate in this role. And you'll take these roles that have a large need to flex, labor, and you'll work on those first, and then you'll go to the next one. Go to the next one, and that's how I think it will roll out. And is it going to mean that, yeah, it will mean that we do less kind of manual things. We're not going to go to a screen and type in a bunch of things. We're going to look at the RFQs that we've done for the last, 5 years. We're going to understand what content we put into them. We're going to look at our inventory, and it's going to create those things, and we'll just review it and approve it. Or I'll give you an example of where we can add value, and this is something we've already built, where you couldn't even do it before. There's a lot of these. I don't know why I'm on the sourcing one. I give you some HR examples too.
It's
But
a good example though, because it's really,
It is.
really complex though. It's
Yeah.
much more complex than, like you said earlier,
Yeah.
generating a job
Right.
description, right?
Yeah,
That's not
I have
complex.
some good HR ones too. We should do some of those. Great ones. But there's a number of auctions that happen that are so low value. There's that it's not worth having people manage this process. So what they do is they end up overpaying for pens and pencils or syringes or whatever, because it's too costly to go and do all these like low value auctions. Now we can just completely automate that, right? So we can just say, hey, go run all these auctions, low value, run thousands of them, make sure the quality is there. We're working with certain vendors, and I can save 10-15% on a lot of material that we buy in bulk, right? Where I never could do that in the past. I didn't have the capacity or bandwidth. So those are the types of things that we can do, just that we just didn't have the bandwidth to do in the past. And so, those are just new opportunities to roll out these true automations that we just couldn't never do.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that example is a good one that you could have that conversation with any C-suite leader and they would understand. So I think a lot of maybe it's rumor out there that just flows is that, leaders aren't understanding what the opportunities are with agentic AI and having big chunks of the work being done by them. But what you just said to me, if you were going into a potential customer or existing customer, right, and saying that, they're going to say, of course I want to do that.
Exactly.
Let's do it today, right?
Exactly. So the reason, not the reason, I mean, we put agentic apps out there. It's a whole new architecture. We designed it specifically to be agent backed, meaning like it's not a transactional system. It's like
Right.
it's a team of agents that work in against a desired outcome, and the UI is very, very lightweight. It recommends actions and communications. It's all contextual, completely different. We didn't start. You see, this is what I keep telling everybody. We didn't start with our transactional system and say, hey, now we're going to try to augment this. We've added tons of value in the flow of work. So you have assistants, you have embedded AI, we have all that. But we started over and said, we're going to create these agentic applications that are completely fundamentally different. They're backed by agents. They share information, they share context. So we started over because we believe that we have to kind of reinvent how these systems should work. But we get the value of sitting on top of all of the goodness and so you don't have to change your security model. You don't have to change your permissions. All the auditability is already there. So we know that it's going to be like, it's going to work and things are going to get done in the right way, but we can think about this completely differently. So I think some of that is what people need to kind of start to understand and see. But when I don't know what the end UI will be. Ours is very, very lightweight. It brings actions forward and is very, very dynamic. It's not going to be a chat interface. It's not. I think the world will evolve beyond that. I think ultimately it might just be an exception-based list, meaning like I might be using a Claude channels, or I might be communicating with it through some different source and saying, hey, run these sourcing events for me. And the system goes and does it. And I just check in on the exceptions. I don't know what the end result will be, but at the end of the day, you need to have a framework like agentic applications to go run those processes, define what the goals and objectives are, and execute work. And if you don't have that, you're just going to be behind. So that's kind of how we.
I think it's going to be like I'm looking for the whack-a-mole interface. So like all the problems will pop up and and you hit it with your.
Essentially, that's what it will be. Hopefully, there's not that many, and it'll
with the hammer, and the agent takes it away. Right? That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah. Well,
Chris,
and think about it, like we've wanted this for so long. We've been talking about this for decades.
This was a great, this was a perfect conversation for system of records. We did talk about system of record a lot today, but there's some really fundamental changes happening in enterprise tech. It probably, well, who cares if they're more important than the last bunch of big changes? They're important, right? And they're really interesting. And I think, you could tell you're really jazzed up about it. I got super excited, like literally doing a 17-minute monologue on this last week that I'm not sure anybody like really understood, but it was so much fun to do it. I think there's more to the story here. We'll probably save it for the next time we have you on, maybe a little bit down the road, but we'll share the press release. I'm looking at it right now, so apologies to be looking away, but it's on my other screen. Oracle introduces Fusion agentic applications. We'll share the link to that press release. Oracle's doing a lot, getting the word out. London last week, New York this week at an AI World event, I believe. This is really compelling stuff, interesting stuff, transformative stuff, and I mean that very sincerely. I'm excited, Chris, and I could tell you are too. So thank you for sharing some of the story, getting behind the inside of your viral posts, right, that we've been reading and enjoying lately. So thanks again, man. We really appreciate your time today.
Anytime. Great spending time with you both.
Yeah,
Chris,
and
great
keep up the
stuff.
writing. I live for those posts.
Your favorite. I know Chris is your favorite guest. I'm glad you were able to sit with us too today on System of Record. How about that?
Yes, I know. It's great. I'm like a total fangirl. So yeah.
No, really good stuff. Okay, go to hrhappyhour.net, get all the show archives, links in the show notes, et cetera, et cetera. Thanks, Chris Leone. Thanks to our friends at Oracle for helping out make this happen in a very busy week. My name is Steve Bowes. This is System of Record. We'll see you next time, and bye for now.